Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us on our third Sankofa conversation as we celebrate 10 years of ministry with WomanPreach. So today we're going to go back in time a little bit and talk to various people who have been engaged in this work as interns and as builders of this organization, and talk a little bit about how we add to a thriving organization. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation today. Just like our previous conversations, if you do have a question that you would like any of the panelists to answer, put it in the question and answer box on the screen. Try not to put them in the chats because it's a lot to manage going through the chat conversation. So if you have a question that you would like for us to answer, put it in the Q&A and we'll get to it later on in the conversation. But first off, let me thank each one of you for joining us today. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Shayna. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Judy, for not only being a part of this conversation, but for the work that you've done to add to the organization of WomanPreach. We all came from various directions, so I think that it's fitting for us to start off by talking about who we are and how we got introduced to WomanPreach and what we learned from the organization while we were engaged in that work.
So I'm Reverend Catharine Cummings. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee originally. That's where I met Dr. Bridgman, and just went on a crazy ride and would go out to seminary events with Dr. Holmes and Dr. Bridgman. And before you know it, we're in the New York at the National Cathedral in 2008 with Dr. Emily Towns, Sharice Tucker, all kinds of women were there. I mean, it was packed out, and they were having a very needed conversation on helping women preachers find our voice, helping women find our voice. And I just remember the electricity in the room and looking over at Sharice and so many others, and everyone was just like, we have to continue this. And there's always a clap back that Dr. V would say, and it's like, woman, preach. And from there, it was like, that's it, WP, exclamation. And from that, that seed just grew from 2008. And I was grateful to be the first intern with WomanPreach and to be the first field education student to really help build that momentum and to help me find my voice as a woman preacher who is not only African American, but grew up Irish Catholic and found my way into the Black church of various flavors. And so I'm grateful for this work today.
I guess I'll jump in after Reverend Cummings. I am Judy Alston, and I am a professor at Ashland University, where I also am the director of the doctoral program in leadership studies. I've been at Ashland now for since 2007. Come fall, I will be entering year 33 in teaching. I can't believe it's been that long.
Baby face.
A high school English teacher and morphed into a college professor and administrator. It went back to school in 2012 to work on my MDiv. And I received my MDiv from MTSO in 2016, which was 20 some odd years after I got my Ph.D. I got my Ph.D. in 1996. So the Lord will work with you to do some things that he or she has decided you need to do in your life. But I was the intern 2014, and that's when I met Catherine, my soror. And when you said WomanPreach, that brought a memory, because we were in Chicago and somebody kept saying, women preach. And you were like, woman, get it right, it's woman. So, and I think about that every time I see WP. So I'm glad to be here as well.
Hello, everyone. I am Shayna Watson. Some know me as Mother Shayna in the Episcopal Church. And I am also, thank you, right? I know, right? I'm also the founder and creator of Theocon, which combines theology and Comic-Con. So it's Theocon, where theology meets pop culture. I'm unapologetically Black and unapologetically a womanist and unapologetically a geek. So I gets down with some sci-fi and Afrofuturism. So anyway, right? Exciting. Dr. Bridgman, WomanPreach, I met her as a student at seminary, at Lancaster Theological Seminary. I think I was intern number 2. I think I wanted to lay claim to being the first, but Catherine took the, you got it, Catherine. And so yeah, the opportunity was presented. I took a couple of her courses in homiletics and prophetic preaching. I know the title of this is, what about my voice? And I feel like I lost a voice that I was socialized in and indoctrinated in, and found a voice, recreated one. And that was through being enabled and empowered and being offered safe space to explore with Dr. Bridgman and her courses and with WomanPreach. And I mean, I was really a babe coming up in ministry, having grown up in the Church of God in Christ and only became Episcopalian over the past couple of years. So just having that nurturing spirit and being able to just kind of come alongside with, or Dr. Bridgman bringing me alongside and just sitting at the feet of powerful women. I mean, Jaha and Dion and, Leslie. I'm like, oh my gosh, I read your sermons. I quote you, and now I'm in the room with you. So, I'm trying not to I'm trying to be all cool and stuff, but I'm not. I'm like, is that Will Gaffney? I'm like, wait, Renita Weems is, Dr. Weems is in the room. So it was a humbling experience, a magical experience. I remember all of the things, all of the moments, and also just kind of witnessing WomanPreach growing out of some, tumultuous times, and trying to, how it gets with, communities of color and marginalized voices. We're always trying to state why it matters, why it's important, getting resources, getting funding. So 10 years later, here we are, and I'm just thankful to have been a part of some of those beginning phases and to see it continue to grow.
So Shayna, you probably don't remember this, but on the day that I first came for my interview at seminary at, 56 or 57 years old, I was terrified to be following this call that I'd heard all my life and thinking, what am I doing here? What is going to happen to me? And I went and I sat in the chapel, and you came into the chapel and you saw me probably looking really sad, and you just came over and smiled and said welcome and introduced yourself. And in your presence, I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing you, but it was a powerful moment, right? In this presence, I thought it's going to be okay. And I felt welcomed into this new adventure. And so I live outside of Philadelphia. I'm the Reverend Maria Isabel to my family, Utti McCabe. I use she, her pronouns. And I was trying to think, when I got this invitation, I was trying to think of what my life in faith and what my life in ministry would have been without WomanPreach. And I don't know what it would have looked like, but it wouldn't have been what it is. And so I came to ministry late, following this call that I'd heard all my life. I come from a family of women who all, outside of the church and in the church, spoke with spirits and lived in and out of the world of spirits. And I was taught to hide that. And I was taught to live as though that didn't exist, not to let people know that that was that. And then I landed in seminary, and I met Dr. Bridgman and took classes with Dr. Bridgman, and I noticed, and this is the difference between living one's faith in the world and thinking about one's faith or theorizing about one's faith. And so she invited one day, Catherine, she invited you to be, to come to us. I forget what the technology, I never heard, probably not Zoom at that time, but I was like, oh, Catharine Cummings studies at Harvard. Wow, she's the intern to, no, for real. I'm like, and when the time came to do my field education, I'm not a Christian, I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and I didn't want to go into the churches that were looking for field education students. And so I asked Dr. Bridgman if I could do field education, and then came in and became an intern. And it is one of the great honors of my life. Plus, Shayna had done it, so I knew that Shayna was there to say, okay, Shayna, now who do I call? Like, what do I do now? And the idea of finding my voice, this voice that had been taught to be I was never going to preach. I was never going to preach. And then I forget what program it was. It was a WomanPreach program, and Dr. Callahan stood up and said, you know, I love to preach.
Right.
She said, I loved, and she was like, I could tell she loves to preach. And I had this echo inside my head, you know, you would love to preach too. And I'm like, shh, I don't hear that. But today I do. I love to preach. I love to feel that there's these voices that we have and these stories that we can tell, even if we've been taught not to tell them. So I'm so grateful. And just seeing all of you and remembering, honestly, is making me emotional. So I'm going to be quiet now and let someone else talk. Bless you.
It's a powerful experience. So like similarly to you, Maria, I don't know if any of you all were privileged with Dr. Bridgman's side eye, but I earned it on several occasions because I was the person that decided that I was going to come to seminary, get an MDiv, but stood up in orientation and repeatedly professed, I am not a preacher and I am not anybody's pastor. And every time I said that, she would look at me like I was crazy, like, why are you here then? Like, or what is this voice that is inside of you that you are just refusing to acknowledge? And so I remember sitting in, we had to do a field ed meeting to get placed at a field ed location. And they had this list and I was like, I don't want to be anybody's youth pastor. I'm already working full time, so I can't go to this church and do this for 20 hours. My church refused to let me do my field ed at that location because I was already doing too much. And so I had the privilege of having Dr. Bridgman as my advisor. So I came to her office immediately following that meeting and was like, so what are we gonna do? Because they say I got to do a field ed, but I can't, I'm not a preacher. I don't want to be a pastor, so I don't want to shadow anybody. So what am I gonna do? And she was like, maybe you want to think about being an intern for WomanPreach. And I was like, I don't even understand what that means. Like, what does that look like? What am I going to have to do? And then I went to Jarena Lee and it changed my life. I could tell stories on stories about Jarena Lee. So I'll pause there and say, take a moment and think about the moment when it clicked for you and tell me a story. What was your most memorable or most exciting moments in Jarena? Well, not necessarily Jarena Lee, but whatever program or whatever happened in your intern year. What's a memorable story for you?
I had so many memorable stories. I was still transitioning from my Karate Cat, AKA Silent Night stage. And I too, like Maria, wanted to be more in the background than the foreground, and was developing my voice and listening to very powerful women speak in such a strong way about being inspired by God and leading with such vision. And sometimes just being awestruck, sometimes I felt like the head usher, sometimes the one with the box of tissues and, the little comfort hug, like a little comfort cat, a little support. And so that was a blessing, but actually being invited into seeing the other side of being a woman in ministry and being one who's not afraid to use her voice and to really speak out for justice and the liberating gospel, regardless if you're Unitarian Universalist or recovering Catholic or finding your way in a Disciples of Christ like myself or United Methodist. So one of the things that really struck me was we had a conversation, I forget if it was Jurina Lee or not, but the process of how we developed our voice. And it just hit me so clearly, like Saul on the Damascus Road was, how do I, who told you how to be a woman? How did you even find your voice as a woman? And I just had such an epiphany, like, wow, I've been mimicking people all my life, now I'm 37, but at that time I was much younger. It's just like, we're all trying to grow up into our mother's shoes, our auntie's shoes, and our big sister's shoes, and to see giants in the faith, as Jen said, walking it out and actually explaining their process and how they overcame their fears and struggled to speak, even when their voice shook. And so I was just so privileged to see the breaking forth of so many women coming from that caterpillar and breaking out of that chrysalis to a butterfly. And, even me, it happened to little me from Memphis. So that's one of my memorable times, is just being with people and walking with them as we all changed, as we all grew and was nurtured by other women, women preachers who midwifed us into full-grown, homegrown womanists and theologians and ethicists. So I'm just so grateful.
Yeah,
go ahead, Dr. Alston.
Oh, all right, my Episcopal sister. I grew up Episcopalian, so I get it. But I'm Disciples of Christ now, and that's been a journey. I was ordained in the Disciples of Christ. But I remember being in Chicago. Was it Chloe's Circle? I think we did that year, and we were staying at a hotel over there by Chicago Theological, University of Chicago, and we walked to the seminary, and I got to know. That's where I met Gail Rice and Naomi Mitchell, Catherine, of course, Karen Carlo, who we just hit it off, and we laughed, and it was just an amazing time just to be a woman in ministry, because I hadn't really thought about it before. But this wasn't my track in life that I had decided. But I remember Jaha.
MFing ha.
Exactly. And I always go Jaha, But she was doing a poem, of course, at one of our early sessions that weekend. And she said something about, it's levels to this thing. And I looked at her and I said, you mean like Meek Mills, the rapper, Meek Mills, levels to it? And that has been our ongoing joke since then. But Jaha, wow, the ministry that exudes from her presence, the words that come out, and the images, and the way that I was able to connect that to what God was doing in me, and how I then could express myself, because I I had been a teacher for so long at that point, right? I started teaching in 1987 at Cane Hoy High School outside of Charleston, South Carolina. I'm a Geechee girl, right? And I taught there, and then I taught in Columbia, South Carolina, left there and went to Penn State to get my doctorate. And so in 1996, I started in higher education at the University of Houston. And so I was really ingrained in that world of teaching and higher education. But I had made a promise to God when I was 17 that if God would just leave me alone for a little while and let me do some things, that I would come back and answer this call that I knew I had. And when I was 47, the Lord said, you remember? So come on. So that's when I started at United Seminary in Dayton. I live here in Columbus, and ended up there. And that's how I found out about WomanPreach and Dr. Bridgman. And then Leslie Taylor said, I don't know why you're going all the way down there. MTSO is right here by your house. You're actually right. It's only about 15 minutes from my house. But to be real, they wanted more credits for the MDiv than United did at the time. But I did switch over. And I was able to then begin to connect the dots of what I learned and saw in that one weekend in Chicago, and experiencing Reverend Dr. Terrell and in the powerful word that she gave, and like I said, Jaha, and then the relationships. And there's the thing, since then, I'm still connected to these women. We don't see each other. Reverend Gail came to, because I also belong to South Euclid United Church of Christ in Cleveland with the Reverend Courtney Clayton Jenkins. Gail came to preach on a Wednesday night to Cleveland. And Cleveland is 2 hours from here. And it happened to be one of the Wednesdays I wasn't teaching. I got right in my car and drove up to Cleveland because my girl was preaching and I wanted to be there on the front row in the amen corner. I mean, we got to say hi and hug for, 5 minutes, but it's these enduring relationships that I've received from this.
And Judy, I don't know if you realize this, but when you were finishing up at MTSO, I was starting, and you had an evening class with Dr. Bridgman as my day was ending. And so you would park right next to me. And you would be like, I'd be like, you'd be like, you got it. And you would give me that encouragement just to keep going. And at that point in time, I didn't even realize you were connected to WomanPreach, but you were just being a sister and loving on me and encouraging me. And I think that that's one of the things that we get and we learn about how to encourage other women in ministry when we're engaged in the work of WomanPreach. And so like from going to events and being introduced to Jaha and her work, and I'm in this moment recognizing that everybody may not know who Jaha is. Jaha is the artist in residence for WomanPreach. She has come to every single event that WomanPreach has done, and God has gifted her with a unique skill to put words together in such a way that will interrogate a text and challenge you to think about what you believe in ways that you have never thought about it before, right? And so we always start off with Jaha because words are important and interrogation is important, and it gets us to this place of like, ooh, like who is the God that she is talking about? Because that's who I need to learn about. And so like she does that, and it spins us into all of these different things. And I'm thinking about when I went to my first event, when I went to Jarena Lee as a participant, not necessarily as an intern, and I found out how important words were, because I was preaching. This was the second time I had ever preached in my entire life. And Dr. Bridgman said, everybody is going to preach during their cohort group. And if you do not have a sermon, then people are going to look at you for 10 minutes because I told you to come with a sermon. So you need to get it together before you get into the room if you have not prepared, but everybody is getting a 10-minute sermon. And I had written mine, but I was raised Baptist, like in Texas, like traditional, first giving honor to God who was the head of my life kind of Baptist, right? And so when I did my prayer to introduce like my sermon, I said, God, erase every piece of me before I preached this sermon, and my cohort leader was Sharice, and she was like, no, because that's not what we're doing here. Like, God has sent you through some experiences and some things, and you have prepared in a certain way. God doesn't need to erase you because you need to show up because you're the person that is preaching. So don't ever say that again. And I was like, oh, I wasn't supposed to say that? Okay, I don't really know what I'm supposed to say. She was like, if you don't know what to say, just preach. Just give us what you have. Don't erase who you are, because who you are is valuable and important. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm happy to say that other than telling the story, I have never said those words again. And so it has changed to God use every piece of me, every preparation moment, every ounce of who I am to tell the story that you would have me tell in this moment, right? And so even like learning how to use words in the preaching moment has changed who I am as a minister and as a person because of WomanPreach.
Jennifer, can we stay with that theme? That's actually the story I want to tell. The words and also the embodiment. WomanPreach, Dr. Bridgman, it's the fullness, right? It's the mind, body, and spirit, bringing the fullness into the presence, into the room, into the preaching moment. And that was something that, I used to kind of like mutilate before, like, deny flesh, crucify flesh, Lord, so that you can shine, like all those things.
I'd be
like,
behind the cross. Like, don't let nobody see me. Like,
I know. I'm like, oh my gosh, what were we saying? Like, I'm going back reading old emails and sermons. I'm like, what did I do to myself? I'm like, I am literally a terrorist to my own being. So just the embodiment. And if I can also add, just making preaching sexy, like it can be an experience, a deep and intimate experience. And that's also another layer and texture and dimension that WomanPreach has brought to the fore. I mean, just to be able to see these magnificent prophetic voices in all of their glory and magnificence, just being conduits and vessels and in their fullness, preaching the word of God. I mean, it's so badass. I'm like, yes. Dr. V, I don't know if she still preaches like this with her fingers, but I used to say, I'm like, it's like you're directing the cosmos. It's just you, God, and the stars and the galaxies. It's all you, boo. Do it. Make movements. So yeah, I just wanted to add on to that, Jennifer, the word and the body, and it's about having literally skin in the game and showing up. But I didn't come into that until WomanPreach, because not only as a woman and growing up in Church of God in Christ, and that cultural ethos of that we're unworthy, we're undeserving, the flesh is weak, the flesh is ugly, the flesh is this, the flesh is nasty, it's dirty. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't until having a Black professor, can we just talk about that in general, for probably the first time between her and Dr. Allen and one other. I mean, I haven't had any Black like teachers until seminary. So to sit at the feet of a powerful, bold and brazen and strong and vulnerable, brilliant, beautiful Black woman such as Dr. Bridgman, and to have this collective of WomanPreach bringing all these voices from across the nation and the world together in such an amazing way, it's inspiring. So I would have to say that WomanPreach in my life definitely gave me that confidence, helped to build esteem. And it's not to say that I still have my struggles, but I don't think I would have seen ordination without WomanPreach and without those magnificent voices. And is Proverbs in the room? What's a real Levon? Where's she at? Like, she was another like badass next to Jaha. I mean, the artistry, right, of preaching. It's not just this heady, over intellectualized, let's exegete Jesus out of the text type of exercise. It's head, heart, it's art, it's expression, it's music, it's song, it's poetry, it's Marvin Gaye, all those things. So anyway.
Yeah, it's that head, heart, and what I call a head, heart, and a hand, right? So it's Mary McLeod Bethune, the work that that was kind of her conceptual framework for when she created her university, Bethune-Cookman. But then, I was also a member of 4-H, believe that or not, right? And so it's head, heart, hand, and health. And now I'm incorporating that in how I preach and teach, and the research that I do on tempered radicals and refined revolutionaries. And that is in leadership. And that's one thing that I really appreciated about Dr. Bridgman, and having me to bring that skill set to WomanPreach, which also allows me to then preach in my teaching, because as a professor, and you talk about being the only or seeing the only, I am the first and only full Black female full professor at my institution. And I was promoted in 2010, and the institution has been around since 1878. And I'm still the only Black female full professor. But I use that space in my classroom to pull all of that head, heart, hand, and health together. And it's like it's in my moment of preparation. I'm going back to what you said, Jen. People are hiding me behind them, and somebody said that, and Dr. Bridgman was like, "Hide! What you hiding for?" Right. And so, as I prepare to teach my classes, I have a hymn of preparation or a song of preparation. Some of y'all on Facebook with me, it's James Brown, John Coltrane. It might be funkadelic, but it's something that's going to get me there, and then going into my room to teach and preach, but bringing all of what I experienced in WomanPreach in that space where I'm talking about leadership and ethics and living, right? So it's infused in everything that I do.
Well, to piggyback on that, Dr. Judy, is with the head, heart, the hand, the health, I believe WomanPreach with embodiment, as my sister Shayna said, there was also a wholeness and a holiness that came to the work. And that's why the process of being with women, the process of creating a sacred space, a sacred container of prayer and preparation, making the space holy, setting the time and the place, making the time holy, and allowing women to say, yes, we can sanctify this time in this space, and we too can create safe sanctuary for one another so that God can transform us, renew. And even for many of us, we were not just resuscitated, but, resurrected, and many of us experienced a personal Pentecost in the transformation of our spirituality and the transformation of seeing others grow as we grow, and in the experience of being broken open. And when one woman broke open or let out a cry because of maybe the theologian in residence or the artist in residence, I remember Kurt Whalum, all kinds of folks who have blessed us, but when they touched our head, our heart, our spirit, right? That infusion that Judy is talking about, it just created a space that one popped off and the rest just started being set free. And literally, we had an underground railroad situation of women preachers just developing and growing up from girls to women preachers, from being girlish to womanish. And so that wholeness and holiness that was brought to the work was such a blessing to me. To see that we could bless our own space was so powerful. And so I'm grateful that we could be a part of that, and we could learn how to change the world one preacher at a time, that we could stamp out bad preaching, one preaching at a time, because that's what we came to do. We reclaim our time and our voice by stamping out bad preaching, one preacher at a time.
Yes. So we have all taken a lifetime worth of lessons and things from WomanPreach. I feel like if we started right now listing all of the things that we have learned from WomanPreach, like we could go for the rest of the night. Like I know I learned that it's okay to preach the Old Testament. Thank you, Sharice, because I felt like if I couldn't put Jesus on the cross, kill him and get him back up, then I wasn't actually preaching. And so I didn't want to preach the Old Testament. But then I kept getting the Old Testament text with WomanPreach, and they were like, you got to preach what you were given. And so I was like, but I don't know how to talk about the Old Testament and talk about God without talking about Jesus. And they were like, well, then who is it the God that you serve? Because if you don't know God, then you really don't know Jesus. So then what are you really talking about? So we could spend hours talking about what we have taken from WomanPreach and how we have grown in our ministry and as our person. What do you feel like is the one thing that you gave to the organization? Because we all came in not all put together, right, with needing things. And so it's easy for us to get poured into. Do you think that you gave anything to the organization? And if so, what did you give?
I'm watching, the Zoom chat as well. For me, I think I helped to contribute just some strength and part of my personal journey to it. Just helping to uplift the platform and not just through prayer, but I was growing personally, spiritually, growing in wanting to be more like Jesus day by day, and being inspired by Dr. Bridgman's walk, being inspired by Dion, Sharice, all my big sisters in the faith. And so my part was to hold the door open for the next women to come forth and to kick it open much more fuller and more broader. And so my contribution really was, this needs to be nationwide. This needs to be on the map. And we're here at Harvard. We're going to do it and start this field education. I don't care what they say. I'm not doing anything else but WomanPreach. And we're just going to pray on it and give it to the Most High God, El Shaddai, and we're going to go forth and praise the Lord. Praise our name that those doors swung open. And so I've just been so impressed by everyone who continues to walk through those doors.
Catherine, didn't you help design the first website?
Yes, and it was all learning experience, but it was like, I don't care, I don't know design, but we're gonna learn, we're gonna watch. This was before YouTube videos could even show you how to do stuff. I'm gonna read all these little things, but it was one of those things, finding our strength and courage and trying out new things. And this ministry helped prepare me more for church ministry, and being really flexible and making it happen. And that's what women preachers do. That's what women pastors do. We make a lot happen out of a little bit. Women professors. And so it was just a joy to help me grow and be nurtured as I was helping to add a few ingredients to an already full table.
I felt like I served more in administrative capacity, just kind of those behind the scenes, being the hands and feet liaison, connecting with folks, networking, making sure that certain things were provided on the ground. I want to say, and Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, that Sophie's table in Nashville, that was the first year we did that. Was it like 2011, 2012? Was that the first time? We had Dr. Dale Andrews, Cedric, I'm gonna say his last name is Jackson, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, so we were at Vanderbilt just kicking it. So I like to think that just some of those smaller pieces, but pieces that mattered in terms of contribution, doing flyers. I mean, yeah, I feel like I took more than what I contributed to WomanPreach, because Dr. Bridgman truly was a mentor. I'd like to think that I had a hand in something, but I'm just like, what did I do? I got a free flight and I got to hear good preaching and I learned a couple of things. So, you know what I'm saying? So between just, being silly, because I've always been crazy, and adding humor to spaces and conversations, learning so much from Sharice, I mean, I feel like WomanPreach was doing some of those, the preaching clinics and workshops before it was a thing. So being a part of that scene earlier on was like 10 years ago now. So I'm like, folks are just now catching up because we're forced into it due to our current COVID climate. But WomanPreach was already on the scene. I forgot there was something else that Dr. Bridgman had was exploring in terms of social media platforms. Like, how do we connect using the interwebs? I'm like, who is this woman? You know, I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm clueless. I just opened MySpace. She's like, baby, let me teach you something. There's this thing called Book of Faces, but it's really AKA Facebook. I'm like, oh, okay, well, let me get one of those accounts. Thank you, professor. You know, yeah, so all the assumptions and stereotypes about Gen Xers and millennials, throw that out the window. I learned some things. So being part of those earlier development of digital or digitized ministry and utilizing social media to connect, utilizing social media to convey prophetic word, to spread those messages, how to market ministry, because we're constantly thinking of branding. I'm like, this is hot. I'm like, okay, prophetic witness. And then we're talking about, you know, business. And I really do feel as though, especially, you know, in communities of color, we don't really talk about the economic component to ministry. You know, we rely on, and it's a good thing to have faith in God and God will provide. And there's this other part where God gave us common sense and business smarts. And so, and to be able to utilize those economic, the business pieces to elevate it from just these on the ground, let's meet in person to translating it to online. I'm like, that was dope. So that was very impressionable to me, and also paying attention to images and what they convey. I remember we were doing the Sophie's Table flyer that focused on domestic violence against women. So this was a part of WomanPreach that was like co-ed, and it involved those who identified as men. And I remember I presented the first draft of the flyer, and and Dr. Bridgman was like, are you committing an act of violence through these graphic images? Take this flyer back, redo it. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, take my little draft. So paying attention to, you know, what our words convey in writing and what images convey, and how those things alone can be harmful without context. So how to create a graphic design, how can that be prophetic in and of itself, in its art form, and being intentional about that. So I'd like to think that, you know, with some tweaking and working with Charisse and Dr. Bridgman in that way, that I've made a small contribution earlier on. So I'm going to claim that, even if it's not true. I'm going to believe that tonight. Hallelujah.
I'm with you, Shane. I'm an administrator to my core. Like, in my heart, I'm an administrator. I will sit in a meeting and give you almost verbatim notes back on who said what, when they said it, in a nice, detailed, orderly manner, and be like, nope, actually on this date at this time you said this, and this is what was supposed to happen because it said it in this email and you didn't. Like, that's just how my brain naturally works. And then I don't know how, but I have a very strategic mind, right? And so a lot of, like, I feel like WomanPreach has been the first place that I've really worked or like been engaged in where they accepted it instead of calling it defiance. So like, if you give me a stop sign and say we can't do something, I'm gonna give you 10 different reasons why we can do it and how we can do it. So like, it's not that I'm not accepting your no, it's just the explanation for your no just didn't satisfy me. And so can we do this way? And so, like, my ability to be like, okay, we can't go this way, but we can go this way, or this way. Which one you want to go? And then there's a plan A, B, and C for whenever that doesn't work. And so that, I believe, is what I added to the organization during my intern year. And felt that like I had a place. And so I've kind of stuck around for a little bit. I was like, I'm gonna keep asking if I could do stuff, even though I'm not an intern no more. Can I help do this spreadsheet, or can we do this a little like this? And like have just kind of stayed into that space, and it works for me. Granted, I can't design a flyer to save my life, but I can post about it, or I can tell you who to send it to and can draft an email and have it out to them in the next 10 minutes. And so I think that it's a matter of recognizing that while I am just a regular person trying to change the world, like my regular person trying to change the world is enough, right? And so as long as I show up as my true, authentic self, doing the thing that I feel called to do and operating within my lane and my calling, there's a place for that, which is what I appreciate with WomanPreach. Maria, you unmuted yourself a second ago. There you go.
I did. I took the plunge. So I was thinking about that because you all asked that question in advance, you know, what did we bring? And I like in my mind, it was hard for me to pinpoint anything that I brought, but I know that the experience was an experience of living into really important things for me, like working collaboratively, right? My experience has always been that in working with other women, that there's a different feel to the way things get done. And so the genuine listening and being present and being part of an organization in all those ways, and then doing what needs to be done. So I'm someone who pays attention to things, and I'm someone who, like, I notice everything. So it's a gift of mine to sort of, okay, well, this needs to be done to deal with it. That needs to be done to deal with it. Then have a few, you know, fangirl moments when I get to meet James Cone, and I'm like, you know, or then go back to paying attention. But also, so this came later after being an intern and after having an opportunity to be part of cohorts, also was to embody my own theology of hospitality and of creating, I don't even know if this can make sense, but creating hospitable, safe places for women to grow in the way that I had begun to grow, and to watch so many different groups come in who, like me, so many women thought that we had to pretend to be something in order to be okay in the church. And then that transformation of learning to be ourselves, and learning how much more power that gave us. And so for me to be able to help others make that transformation, and to rejoice in that transformation with them, is something that I hope, that I brought to, in gratitude to what WomanPreach gave to me. And maybe extra sizes in t-shirts, because I think that happened too.
You know, for me, I'm that natural leader, administrative type person. So I think that's what I brought. If I recall, Dr. Bridgman and I we were working on tightening up some language for the board and board members, and we also did something about the website. We were looking for a new webmaster at the time, but I am a very I do the administrative stuff. I teach the leadership and administrative stuff, but that's just how my mind works. But what I really learned in the process of bringing my entire self, all of this, my authentic self in probably the other thing is, you know, I think I'm a comedian, so I bring that too, right? Is that women can really work together and well. Because what I often hear from my doctoral students is from women, I can't work with another, I don't want to work for another woman, I can't work with women. But WomanPreach, that was not an issue at all. It was that space where we were all able to bring, or is that space where we're all able to bring whatever this gift is, whatever we deposited into this organization, leadership, ministration, some aspect of ministry or whatever, and it was appreciated and honored and honed and actually used, right? Not just that, oh, I know how to do this, and okay, great. So now what you gonna do with it here, right? Because that's not the vision. What you gonna do with it here? And so that's the beauty of WomanPreach to me, that we can all talk about what we feel like we brought, and that it was honored and used, and we still see the effects of those gifts these many years later.
So if there's somebody on this call who loves WomanPreach but hasn't had an opportunity to truly come to a program or get engaged, what would you tell them? Is it worth them doing? Like, what advice would you give somebody that really wants to get engaged but just isn't sure what they should do?
I would say that if you really want a life-changing experience that will pay dividends in your ministry and your life, this is the place to do that. This is the place to experience. This is the place to come and be poured into, because you're not going to get this anyplace else. You're not going to get it at your seminary. You're not going to get it at your church or your house of worship. You're going to get that which you are lacking, and you may not even realize that you're lacking it. That's the thing. And this is the gift that you didn't even realize you needed to have. How about that?
You know, I would also say that in this moment in history, there is no more valuable thing than your voice. Than your voice unleashed, than your voice uncensored, unfiltered, pure from your heart and the God you serve is needed in this moment more than ever. And I didn't have that until I became involved with WomanPreach. I knew that it could be there, but I didn't have it.
I would say you have been weighed, you have been measured and found wanting. You're thirsty, you're tired. Come get refreshed. Come rest. Come get replenished. Have someone speak over you, empower you, speak life into you. I believe Catherine and Judy talked about resuscitation and resurrection. And I believe those words describe accurately what I experienced. Some people are dead folks walking and don't even know it. So coming into this form of baptism, this form of being reformed and transformed in such a powerful way. And yeah, I felt just at peace. I felt in this restful way, like it wasn't like this struggle, you know, it was just like come here, baby. We got you. We got you. You know, I was surrounded by mothers and sisters and spirits of old. So if I were to come across someone who was interested in this, I would just say, just come, just come. So.
I would echo all that you all have said. I think when I came, I hadn't found my voice. I was still running around talking about how I wasn't a preacher or a pastor and had no desire to be either one of them. But I would tell you that when I came, I thought I was a kindergartner sitting in a PhD classroom, right? Completely out of place, not necessarily knowing what I was doing there. I only spent about 10 minutes in that space, right? Because the people that are connected to this work and doing this work day in and day out have a way of affirming you in ways that you have never been affirmed before, have a way of creating space for you where you think there is no space, and have a way of empowering you to find that voice that is within. Like, if you would have told me 5 years ago that I would preach about social justice issues and call out the inequities in systems and challenge people in boardrooms and pulpits to care about women and people of color and transgender and all, like that, I would say those things across a pulpit confidently and boldly, I would have told you that you were a liar, because I didn't know that there was a place for that, right? And so while I wrestled with the church, because I was just like, well, what is the church saying and doing about these things that we can't really talk about? I really learned that you could talk about these things, right? Like, you can call some things out and challenge people to be their best selves. And so, like, one of the things that I am forever grateful for WomanPreach for is to, like, unlocking the gate that I placed on my own voice and freeing it to say, no, actually what we're going to say is this, or actually what you're not going to say about my God is this. And, like, putting some truth and some clarity to who God is, because you may lie on me, but you're not going to lie about my God. My God is a God of love. And so, like, that freeing that happens when you're there, you don't realize you need or want till you get there, right? And so I would tell you to just come as you are, right? Because you're going to leave better than you came, and you're going to bless some people regardless of how you show up. So just
yeah. Come on here now.
whenever you want to come and do the work that God has called you to do, whether you feel like you are good enough or bad enough to do it. And know that if you are truly operating in your calling and your gift, it will make room for you. And WomanPreach is one of those organizations that has made room for many, 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 many voices, right? And there's more to be made room for, but you got to come. So take the baby step, and then let's go and do this thing.
Come on, Miss, I didn't want to be a preacher. You better come on here.
Where's the usher? I need a blanket. I'm slain.
The doors of the church are open. If there's one who wants to live life, to preach and get in your life, come on to WomanPreach. That's what we're going to say. And at the end, you too will be getting high-fived in the pulpit, high-fives, back-slapping, and it's strengthening your voice, strengthening who you are as a child of the Most High God. And all of the beauty and all of the fullness of our divinity will be able to share that Holy Spirit and love with all we encounter. So if you are feeling something in your spirit, we definitely want you to sign out. Reach out to Jen, reach out to Janae, reach out to Dr. Bridgman, reach out to any of us here, because we'll help usher you right on in, because you will get your life. And you will understand that when you say that yes, when you feel that call, when you feel that pull, you know, it's no need to fight it. You've been fighting it all this time. You know, we already know we done lost the battle, because you just need to go on and turn it over and be transformed. And so, as you can see from everyone who's talked today, we've all been transformed. And as Pastor Lau always remind us, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And you'll find that here in a safe place at WomanPreach. Mm-hmm.
We got about 25 more minutes, and I want to make sure that we're creating space for people who are on the conversation to ask some questions. So I would encourage you that if you have a question, to put it in the Q&A box. It's on the bottom of your screen. It should be next to participants and chat and all of that. Hit the Q&A box, put your question in there. There's a couple of people that have put questions in there already. So let's see if we can answer some of these questions. And so someone asked, can you all say something about maybe what you think you could have done as interns? So was there anything that you could have done that you didn't get a chance to do, that you passed the torch on to somebody else, or that you wanted to add to the organization that you didn't get the time or opportunity to do?
Dr. Bridgman, can I tell him about the protests?
I'm going to say yes.
Listen, you know, every seminary has room for improvement, and we were tired of not having a tenured Black professor. And we raised our voices. I reached out to Dr. Bridgman, and next thing I knew, we were having a protest silent demonstration during a board of trustee meeting in the chapel. And here we are. Now we have tenured people, and everyone is being trained in anti-racial justice. So I don't think there's anything as an intern that I haven't done under the leadership of Dr. Bridgman. Talking about giving voice, that was life-changing. It shifted the cultural ethos at the seminary, to be able to organize on a grassroots level, from students to staff who were allies, to board members who supported us, Dwayne Royster. So yeah, there wasn't anything we didn't do. There's some things we probably shouldn't have done, but we did anyway. Power to the people.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I can't think of anything because we had the room and the space and the latitude to do. Again, whatever your gift is, it's welcome here. So we were never squelched. Nothing was squelched other than hiding behind the cross, right? This was a place to be your authentic self, and to bring your authentic gifts, and also to discover self and to discover gifts.
Honestly, I think we all, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but I know I did way more things than I thought I could and would, right? I mean, it was a time and a space to push and learn and grow and explore almost without limits. So, so I don't know. I can't think of anything left undone, but probably people could go back and say, oh, well, but I don't, I don't see it that way.
I think anything that I wanted to do that I had a plan for doing, Dr. Bridgman was like, let's do it. And so it was a matter of, do you have a plan and a way to do it? And if so, then let's go. So I wouldn't say that there's anything that I couldn't have done or didn't do. I did the things that I created time and space for, and felt like I added all that I could, in that season, in this season as it continues.
I think as I look back, for those of us who are in seminary while we're doing the internship or the field ed, sometimes you always have that desire in ministry, really of perfection. And that's something that we do have to let go of, or even as women, and come into a more realistic position, or perspective of what the work is. And so, for me, it was always, are we doing enough? Are we doing enough? And maybe that's just being so young in the ministry, so zealous. But when we came, what you receive from not just all the participants and the leadership coming up, but what you receive as someone working behind the scenes with Dr. Bridgman, with all the other leaders, and then from the participants who come. That's what was so brilliant about the process and about WomanPreach in this format that really has been recreated in other ministry contexts now, is that 21st ministry setting was set with WomanPreach, and it helped us to sharpen our voice prophetically. It helped us to clarify who we were as women preachers. And because we could learn from one another in the process, it created more fertilizer for the fruit going forward. So, my regrets always was just, can we do more? Can we do more? And Dr. Bridgman, Dr. V would be like, Kat, you got to sleep. So I was just always excited, because it's just seeing the gospel embodied in each of us and all these women who become alive by the word. There's nothing like it. were activated for such a time as this.
And then there's questions going in the chat that's similar to the question that's going on in the Q&A, asking about how people can get engaged in the work now that we are currently in a pandemic. And I can tell you that you should pay attention to social media pages of WomanPreach. We're on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram, as we are still adapting to the pandemic and not able to do one-on-one or like in-person programming. We will be figuring out how to do some digitalized programming, but we will make a lot of those announcements through social media. So pay attention to those pages and you'll be the first to know about what is going on there. There's another question in regards to how WomanPreach has prepared you to be a mentor to other women in ministry. Does anybody want to talk about that? How are you mentoring others in ministry because of the work you've done with WomanPreach?
I think for me, it's just strengthened what I had already been doing in the academy before, right? I didn't have a strong mentor as a doctoral student, because again, I was at Penn State in educational administration. I was the only Black female. And it's like, you're the only Black female Ph.D. student we've had in 15 years. Well, thank you for that. But I am glad y'all are paying for this, so I ain't saying much. But I didn't have people who looked like me. And that's my whole educational career. If you go back, I just wrote a book chapter on, it's called Perfect Practice Makes Perfect. The sister Mary Regis's life as a tempered radical and a refined revolutionary. She always said perfect practice makes perfect. And she was a Black nun of the order in Baltimore, Oblate Sisters of Providence. But I didn't have anybody that looked like me in that program. And I was determined that when I finished my PhD, that I was, as a professor, going to mentor those women, men, whomever wanted it, but particularly those who were Black and female. And so while I don't do church ministry, although the church tries to get me to do some stuff, and I do, I take that back. I am determined that behavior has to continue, because you don't see folks that necessarily look like you, or in my case, as a queer Black female, right? I'm a woman, married to a woman, been married to the same woman for 19 years. We just had our anniversary, and I'm out loud, proud, and authentic. And so there's some young women who see that, who are also in ministry. They go, oh, I can be that. I can do it that way. And so I'm determined to share that, to answer questions, to be a guide, to be a light in a way, because I want it to be better than when I got into it. I want to say that when it's all said and done, I left it better. I'm leaving a legacy. I'm not leaving an inheritance, right?
So my experience at some level is that the work is meaningless unless we pass it along, unless we pay it forward and share it with others. My growth is of value to me, but it also needs to be of value to the world and to the people I serve and the people I love. And so, and I think about being a parish minister now, that thing I was never going to do, preaching 17,000 times a year, that thing I was never going to do, but also carrying a vision, because this was something else. You didn't ask this, Jen, so forgive me if I'm changing the topic, but at some level too, WomanPreach helped to prepare me to be strong in the face of the world that still largely does not want to hear what many of us have to say, right? I mean, being real about that. and to be clear about that, and then to recognize those people, for me, those people around me who have the desire to cross those boundaries, into justice seeking and prophecy making and truth telling in spaces that don't want to hear that. And to so I've taught leadership for many years also, and tried to embody what being a leader as a woman, and now an elder, and a Latina woman elder, and at this point in my life. And to say, faith isn't faith for me if it doesn't liberate, right? And liberate in a real way, like a real way, not just, oh, I think this, but liberate in a real way in the way we live our lives. And that's everything. Like that's your religious education curriculum, and that's your preaching, and that's the way you treat one another, and the way you make promises to one another, and whatever your context. That's all. It's fundamentally, if it's not liberating, then and if I'm not in some way helping others to liberate themselves, then this is, this isn't, I'm not doing the work God called me to do. I'm done now.
I would say that I don't know that I'm specifically mentoring anyone, but I will tell you that what I am doing is committed to showing up as me. And that in and of itself becomes the example. Like I said, I grew up in a Baptist church. I wasn't used to seeing women in the pulpit. I wasn't used to seeing women openly talk about their theology and who God was. And so I would like to say that my way of mentoring others is by doing the thing that I'm called to do and not rejecting the call that I know that I have. Right now, whether or not I want to operate in said call is another conversation, right? But I'm going to show you that it is possible to be a little Black girl and talk openly about God in the pulpit and not from the music stand on the side, right? Like I can model for you that it's okay to do this work, and to use your voice to bless and help the people, right? That God has said something specific to you and it is okay for you to say it. Because oftentimes when we don't see ourselves in the preacher or in the church, we question whether or not we belong there. And so while not directly like holding someone's hand and walking them through this space yet in ministry, what I am is showing them that it's possible and being an example for anybody that wants to see. Anybody else want to add to that?
I'm just going to echo what one of the attendees says. Defiance is your strength, Jen. Work it.
Are there books or articles or things like that that you would recommend for others to engage with that you were introduced to during your WomanPreach experience?
There were so many.
So many.
I'm like,
all of Renita Weems, all of Emily Town, all of Jarena Lee. Like, just call the Womanist Role and just work it.
yeah.
And you will have it. I mean, just get a Stacey Floyd Thomas, but like, just go to the back of the book and just start working your way. I'm sorry, I'm very a decade removed from seminary now in some ways, but the scholarship is continuing to grow. And so you have to, reach into what's calling you at this time. And so back then it was Womanist Midrash by Will Gaffney, but where your passion is now, that's where you pull that thread and just follow, particularly the women scholars and the women of color scholars. And they'll help to be your guide in this time where we need our voices be so bold and courageous.
May I add to I never heard of Jarena Lee before WomanPreach. So the Jarena Lee Preaching Academy brought back to life Jarena Lee, the first woman who was ordained to preach in the AME church. I think like in 1820 or something like that. Circa. If I say circa, then that makes the timing legit, right? Okay, so I can get it wrong. But yeah, and honoring voices of time past. Absolutely. So any of the ancient ones in that way, the ancestors, all of the books. Thank you, Catherine. I'm like everything. I was trying to think of some other folks. I'm like drawing a blank.
Yeah, but I think Catherine, started calling the roll, and so
Yeah, the role, yes.
What WomanPreach did was give us that vantage point of seeing that we actually are there in the work, and connecting us to Jarena Lee and coming forward, because it's what happens in research and all the time, is that our voices are not heard, or they'll say, well, we couldn't find one. There are no women, there are no Black women leaders, or no Latino women leaders. But then we have a WomanPreach, and then we get to see, and then we're connected to the scholars. We get to actually see them in the flesh, then hear them, and then we start to look for their work. And when we look for their work, you go to the back of the book, like you said, and then you find the others, right? I wrote a little book a few years back called Her Stories, about African-American women activists in leadership, because the canon of leadership is always white and male, cisgendered white male, right? And the great men theories, and men did this, and so I said, well, I know that there were Black women leaders, because I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was real clear about Septima Poinsett Clark, and she was a leader, a Black woman, and so that's what I really appreciate about WomanPreach, is the exposure. And then you add on top of that, like me and Jen too, right, at MTSO, taking the class with Dr. Bridgman, right? Taking your homiletics class with her, or taking another course where that's a whole nother Zoom, right? That's a whole nother.
And I was doing my field ed. She was my supervisor field ed, my advisor, and my homiletics professor at the same time. So like, that's a whole nother.
You talk about learn you something, right? Right? Or their famous line, she might be an Old Testament scholar, but she do know the New Testament. Don't play with her on that, right? So it's just that exposure, and then us actually having that opportunity to delve into that, and to be able to connect with one another and have the conversations about the experience that we had with those readings.
I have to put a plug in too for the poets, right? The poetry. I mean, if you can find Jahaziah Nabu's poems, read Jahaziah. I mean, when she read the poem about the blue jeans for the first time, I about fell out of my chair. When she read that line about spit shine your uterus, remember that? My friend, spit shine your uterus and put it on, I forget, on the altar. I was like, oh my God. So the poets and the Mujerista theologians, because it's scholarship too, but it's also the great writing of spirit.
So we have just a few minutes left. So I want to give everybody, like, take a minute or less and give us your closing thoughts. We've talked about a lot. We've talked about the impact of WomanPreach, what we've learned, what we gave, how we've grown. Sum it all up for you.
To me, Woman Preaches is living prophetic work. It's part of the gospel on the back end of Revelation. Just, keep the back end open because many more minor and major prophets through women are kicking that Bible right on open and kicking inspired texts and moving it forward through our writing, through our preaching, through our teaching, through our embodiment in the world. So I'm just always inspired by every person who comes through Woman Preach, because we got some, I don't want to cuss on here because, I'll be the cussing prophet too. So I'm trying to, it's after 7. It's after 7. Amen. So I'm trying to get right in. But we understand that we're coming to full prophetic voice. And so seeing Shayna come behind me, seeing Judy, seeing Maria, oh my gosh, seeing Jen, seeing Janae, seeing so many, it's just inspired me so much and touched my heart so much today. So I say, hey, thank you for your witness because I'm encouraged. Mm-hmm.
I think I will say Woman Preach was, Woman Preach is, Woman Preach will be. That's who she is. She is always everywhere at the same time. It's about how you determine that you are going to walk in her, how you are going to imbue her, how you are going to let her get into you so that then you can become all that you really have been created to be in ministry and in life. That's the kind of effect that Woman Preaches had on me. This is the legacy, the shoulders that we stand upon from Jarena Lee to where we are sitting right now. That's Woman Preach.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the experience for this part of my life. I'm so grateful. Dr. Bridgman, to each of you, to see your faces. What a gift. What a gift.
Y'all got all deep and preachy. I was trying to think of something creative and flashy to say, but Woman Preach is amazing. What I would like to see, and unless I've missed it, I would love to see us have a commercial. Just some type of fantastic, I think one of the questions was about visualizing Woman Preach over the next 10 years or something like that. And I can see this really fantastic, dramatized, just a little ad, doesn't have to be long, just something visual that would capture the essence of Woman Preach and the programming and the artistry that we offer and the opportunities that we offer. So that would be something that I would be interested in getting behind and helping to resource. And my hope would be that all of us as a collective who have trailblazed some of these pathways would be willing to support as well to elevate the visibility of Woman Preach, of this work that we love and have been blessed by. And I do, because this is being recorded, I want to make a correction. Sister Charmaine Davis, I believe her name was, Jarena Lee was licensed in the early 19th century and not ordained. She was ordained posthumously in 2016. So I do want to make that correction, but that's how I see Woman Preach, and that's how I hope to continue to support its future.
I will continue to support Women Preach with not only my money, but my time and my talents. I think that once you have been a part or connected to a program, to an event, to this organization as a whole, like this, it holds on to a piece of your heart. So I will continue to allow it to hold on and be a part of me and tell the story of WomanPreach, and ask people to give and support to it, whatever that looks like. And so I am grateful for each one of you taking time out of your night tonight to be with us. I'm grateful for each one of the participants who logged in, and all of the panelists who came and shared stories. I don't think it's appropriate to end a WomanPreach event without making an ask, right? We do this work, and we're able to do this work because people support this work, right? And it's one thing to say that you care about the organization. It's another thing to put your money where your mouth is, right? And so there is an opportunity, even tonight, for you to give and to support this work of the organization. And so on the screen right now, you should see different ways to give. We accept Cash App, which is the $ at WomanPreach. Please, in the for section, put Sankofa 3 in your first and last name. You can give through PayPal. You can even send a check. So however you would like to give to support this work, please, 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 please feel free to give even now, so that this work can continue, so that we can continue to change the lives of preachers all over this country. We have gathered tonight and been able to share our personal stories, but we want to be able to continue that work. So no amount is too small and no amount is too big. So whatever you have that you can give, please give it tonight, so that we can not only continue to do conversations like this, but also continue to run programming on a digital space as we are transitioning to that space. And so I will leave this screen up so that you can jot down the information and have it, because I believe in my heart of hearts that if you've been touched or you've been blessed, that you will make a way to give to the organization. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you for being a part of this conversation and for your support of the organization. So thank you, thank you, thank you for coming out tonight. Oh, y'all stay on for a second, okay, panelists. All right, y'all. I think, Dr. Bridgman, you hear him? Yes.
She said, turn the recording off.
I did. That's why I said, Dr. Bridgman, you there? Oh, I see what you're saying. I stopped it. Janae, are you able to ensure that it's not recording right now?
Okay, is everybody, I think I got everybody out. That's not us, right? Yes, we're clear?
Yes, can you ensure that the recording stopped? On my end, it says recording, but I hit the stop button.